Okay, in chapter 6 of To Kill a Mockingbird, Jem and Dill want to go look in Boo Radley's window. Remember, this is Jem, he's Scout's older brother. This is Scout, she's kind of a tomboy, she's about 7 years old. And then this is their friend Dill, who stays in the summer with Aunt Rachel, who is the next door neighbors to Jem and Scout. So they want to go look in Boo Radley's window. Scout really doesn't want to because she knows that it's going to cause trouble, and they've already gotten in trouble with Atticus for disturbing the Radleys before. So Jem and Dill end up making fun of Scout, and they call her a girl, and Scout takes offense to this, and so she decides that she's going to go with them. So they go over to the Radleys. It's dark. It's late at night. They get onto the back porch. They try and look in the window, and as they start to look in the window, a shadow comes up behind them. And they get really freaked out, so they try to run away. And as they're running away, someone fires a gun at them, probably Mr. Radley. As they're running away, they get stuck at a fence, and Jem has to wiggle out of his pants because his pants are caught on the fence. They eventually get free, make it back, and they tell Atticus that Jem lost his pants playing strip poker with Dill, which obviously didn't happen. They get back to the house, and Dill goes back to he goes back home, and Jem's like, I have to go back for my pants. And Scout doesn't want him to. And he's like, Atticus is going to know. He's going to be so mad if I don't have my pants. So he ends up going back, and he gets his pants, and he makes it home. In chapter 7, Jem's in a really weird mood, and Scout doesn't know why. Scout also goes on about how much she still hates school. And then Jem ends up telling her that when he went back for his pants on that night that they got shot at, he went back and his pants weren't stuck to the fence like he'd left them. Instead, they were neatly folded over the fence, and it looked like somebody who was really bad at sewing had tried to sew up the hole in them. He thinks it might have been Boo Radley who did the sewing, which is creepy. As they're coming home from school one day, they find twine in the knothole of the tree. They've also found soap dolls, a pack of gum, a spelling bee medal, and a broken watch. They don't know who has left all of this stuff for them. They think that it might be Boo Radley because they think that they're watching him, or he's watching them. And the soap dolls look exactly like Jem and Scout. Now, Scout freaks out because she thinks they're like voodoo dolls and they're like cursed. But it may be that Boo Radley is leaving gifts for them. At the end of this chapter, they go by the knothole once more. However, Mr. Radley is outside filling it with cement. He tells Jem that he's filling it with cement because the tree is dying. However, Jem later asks Atticus if the tree is dying, and Atticus says, no, it's as healthy as me and you. And Jem understands that the real reason that Mr. Radley filled the knothole with cement was so that Boo Radley could not have a communication with the children any longer. At the end of this chapter, Jem cries because he'd been planning to leave a thank you note to Boo Radley, thanking him for all the gifts that he'd left. However, he's now unable to do this, and so he cried. In chapter 8, it snows, and this is a really rare thing. Remember, they live in Alabama. It's the South. It's warm. It doesn't ever snow there. So the fact that it snows is really exciting. School is canceled. Miss Maudie, their neighbor, however, is not happy about the snow. She, remember, loves gardening, and she has all of her plants, and she's afraid that her plants are going to die. So she brings all of her plants indoors, as many as she can, and she lights a fire to keep her plants warm. Unfortunately, this catches her house on fire, and Atticus wakes the kids up in the middle of the night, takes them outside just to make sure that their house doesn't catch on fire, and they watch as Miss Maudie's house burns down. Scout suddenly realizes that she has stopped shivering, and she looks around and realizes that somebody has put a blanket over her, and she didn't even notice it happening. Atticus later tells her that it was Boo Radley who came up behind her and put the blanket around her shoulders. Scout is so freaked out by this that she feels like throwing up. But this kind of leads us to the next question. Is Boo Radley as terrifying as we thought all along? Maybe not. In chapter 9, Scout ends up fighting Cecil Jacobs because Cecil Jacobs said that Atticus was an inward lover. Everybody in town is really upset that Atticus is deciding to defend Tom Robinson. Tom Robinson is a black man who is accused of raping Mayola Ewell, a white woman. And everybody's so mad that he is taking a black man's word over a white man's. Now, Atticus says that he absolutely believes that Tom is innocent and he has to defend him because it's the right thing to do. He doesn't think he's going to win the court case, but he knows he has to do it because it's the right thing to do. He says he wouldn't be able to hold his head up in town if he didn't. Later in the chapter, it's Christmas, and they're excited because they get to see their Uncle Jack, and Uncle Jack brings them air rifles. Miss Maudie later says that they can shoot any of the blue jays they want, but it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. What she means by this is that mockingbirds don't harm anything. They are innocent creatures, and because they don't harm anyone, it would be a sin to kill them. So, anyway, they go over to Aunt Alexandra's house later in the chapter, and they don't like it because Aunt Alexandra always tells Scout that she needs to be wearing dresses and that she's not feminine enough. Remember, Scout's like a super tomboy. She just likes playing around with her friends and wearing overalls. She does not like wearing dresses, and that's not her personality. She later gets into a fight with her cousin Francis. Francis is super annoying, and he keeps calling Atticus an inward lover, and Scout ends up beating him up. At the end of the chapter, Uncle Jack is talking to Atticus, and Atticus says that he hopes his children don't catch the usual disease in Maycomb, the usual disease being racism. So he wants his children to not be racist. In chapter 11, the kids are talking about how Atticus is old and he can't do anything. He ends up shooting a rabid dog, and the kids realize that he is a really good shot and that he hasn't been bragging about this. They're suddenly super impressed by him, and they ask Miss Maudie why he's never talked about it before. And Miss Maudie says that it's not polite to show off your talents, and Atticus says that he felt like it gave him an advantage over other living things. Oh, the dog had rabies. He wasn't just out there shooting a dog. In chapter 11, Miss DeBose, their creepy old neighbor, starts yelling at the kids from the porch, and she calls Scout ugly and gets mad about Atticus, and Jem gets super mad, and he destroys all of her flowers. Jem obviously gets in trouble for doing this, and his punishment is to read to Miss DeBose. He starts noticing something weird as he's reading to her. Every day he has to read a little bit longer and a little bit longer, and it doesn't really seem like Miss DeBose is paying any attention. At the end of the chapter, we learn that Miss DeBose was not actually that interested in what Jem was reading, but she was trying to break her addiction to morphine. She knew she was dying, and the one thing that she really wanted to do before she died was to break her drug addiction. Kind of like Atticus, what he said about the court case. He said that he didn't think he was going to win the court case with Tom Robinson, but it was the right thing to do defending him. Miss DeBose is kind of courageous for that same reason. She knows she's going to die in the end, but she knows that breaking her morphine addiction is the right thing to do. So Atticus calls her courageous. She ends up dying at the end of the chapter, and she leaves Jem a perfect white flower, which Jem gets freaked out about and throws in the fire. And that is the end of chapter 11 and the end of part 1.